Okay, hey everybody, this is Brian and
Presley.
And we welcome to our first ever podcast.
It is called Validate Me, and basically what is going to be happening is me and my dad are going to be showing each other things that we love that the other person isn't into yet, and then talking about them for about an hour. The general rule is we can make each other consume about 3 to 4 hours of content.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Each. So that could be video games, movies, podcasts, YouTube videos, musicals, albums, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. So, once a week, and probably on Fridays, we're going to, we'll take turns. So this week is my week. I was able to give Presley a couple of things to watch and take a look at, and we're going to talk about those. Next week, at the end of this podcast, she will give me my assignment, and then I'll watch a couple of her things, and then, basically it's just us trying to prove to each other that we're actually cool.
Hence why it's called Validate Me.
We're trying to be validated by the other person in our
validate
coolness.
me.
And it came about pretty organically, right? So I guess this is our first episode, and so we should talk a little bit about the origin story of the podcast and where the podcast itself came from, right?
Yep.
And so, most of Presley's life with her content she's consuming has come from me or her mom.
Yeah.
Right? So we've been kind of saying, hey, check this out. This is really cool. You should watch this. Check this out. And so Presley just relatively recently has been discovering a lot more content on her own, like from her friends or Tumblr, and she's been introducing it to me, right?
Yeah.
And so the Adventure Zone, Hamilton even came from her.
Heather's.
Heather's is kind of a win-win.
I made him listen to it once.
So I introduced her to Heather's the movie. She introduced me to Heather's the musical. Right. So there was some back and forth that was going on there. And so the way that we really started off was getting ready to watch Ready Player One.
Yeah.
So I loved the book, Ready Player One. And so I knew the movie was coming, and so I was talking to Presley, and I decided that in order for her to really get Ready Player One, she needed to experience some of the media that was referenced in Ready Player One.
Yeah.
And so I started her watching. I made a list of things I needed, movies I wanted her to watch, or games I wanted her to play or something, and we were kind of plowing through those. And then we started listening to the audiobook in the car together. And so as we were going through that, I was making another list of things for her to watch and do. And so Presley's been just watching a lot of these things, and they were all things from my kind of childhood that I loved. And I was like, no, you have to watch this. It's really awesome. It's so cool. You're going to love it. You should totally check this out, right? And so it was totally validate me, right? It was like, look, no, I know that Overwatch is awesome and that Be More Chill is really cool, but you got to check out these things that were awesome when I was a kid that I really loved, right?
Yeah.
And so I've been introducing all these things to Presley, and then she's been sort of pushing stuff back to me. So that was one of the origins of how the Validate Me thing started.
Many.
Okay, do you want to talk a little bit about what happened at LA Comic-Con?
Sure, let me move my microphone a little bit because it's far off. Haha, hello. So at Los Angeles Comic-Con, we were hanging out with Mike Falzone and Steve Zaragoza, or the Gooch
the Mooch. Falzone and the Mooch. We'll tell the Falzone and the Mooch story later, but yeah, go ahead.
Yes, we were hanging out with them, and we were just talking about the Ready Player One research and how I was starting to push a lot more content towards my dad instead of just him bringing stuff to me, which he thought was, Mike Falzone said, that's really cool, you should do a podcast about that. And we sort of were at first like, that's cool, maybe we would. And then we were like, that's actually a really, really good idea. And so we decided to do that. We came up with a title for it.
Yeah, Presley had it named 5 minutes after.
Which is weird, because I never name things.
Mike Falzone said that. You name everything. So we had been doing a lot of podcast research, because Presley was doing an interview with Steve Zaragoza. And so they have a podcast that they do that's called Feels Like the First Time. That's a Lost podcast. So Presley's watching Lost again. Presley going back into things that I loved. Mentioning Presley is going back into things that I loved. And so in a very similar kind of theme of Presley going back and watching these things. But she's also doing it with Steve Zaragoza and listening to Owen and these guys talking about this podcast. And I love podcasts. I listen to Stuff You Should Know all the time. Presley got me hooked, like I said before, on the Adventure Zone, so we listened to that as a podcast.
I listened to Bim Bam. He doesn't
we
yet.
both listen to a ton of podcasts, and so we kind of like the podcasting format and what's happening there. And after we sort of got that recommendation from Valzone, we thought, we should totally do that.
Yeah.
That's totally worth doing. So we put some equipment together. We had a lot of gear. We put some extra gear together. So I think what we're going to do is we'll shoot a vlog, or not really a vlog, but we'll shoot one of our daily videos on Friday. Will be what you're seeing if you're watching this on YouTube. So the cameras, hi there.
Hey.
So we'll have a camera version of it that may be an edited down version of it a little bit. We haven't really decided what the video version is going to look like. And then we'll post the podcast. And we haven't really decided the posting schedule. That will probably post on Fridays too, but there may be a delay. I don't know. We'll figure this whole thing out. I'm kind of thinking like this podcast should have been titled Bear With Us. I think that might have been a better name for what we're doing here. But I think we'll get it, a couple of weeks, we'll get it all figured out, right? So I would just as another diversion before we dive into this week's content, I was going to say that so we were getting ready for this Zaragoza interview, and as we were talking, I started calling him Steve Zaragucci. And I think that comes from my love of Father Guido Sarducci, which Presley, I'll have to introduce Presley to Father. As part of this, maybe we'll introduce Presley to Father Guido Sarducci, old Saturday Night Live character.
Oh,
and so, I started calling him Steve Zaragucci. And then I started calling him the Gooch because of Steve Zaragucci. I thought the Gooch was a funny nickname to give him. And then I started that was sort of misspeaking. And then I misspoke and called him the Mooch when I was trying to call him the Gooch. And so I got deep into the Mooch, and I thought that was really funny. And I think that probably came from Anthony Scaramucci, who was the Trump's director of public relations or whatever, the press director for like a week. But he actually called himself the Mooch. In conversations, he would refer to himself not only in the third person, but in the third person as the Mooch, which I thought was really funny. And so then I started calling them Foul Zone and the Mooch, which sounds like an 80s movie, kind of like a cop buddy movie.
It sounds like a kid's show to me, like Danger and Eggs.
Well, there was Turner and Hooch, which was actually an 80s movie that was a cop buddy movie, but Hooch was actually a dog. And so it was like Tom Hanks. It was Tom Hanks and this dog.
I love it.
Turner and Hooch cop buddy movie. And so Foul Zone and the Mooch sort of sounds a lot like, so for forever now, they will, for me, be Foul Zone and the Mooch.
It's amazing.
So, I don't know. I love it. It just rolls off the tongue, Foul Zone and the Mooch. And so whenever we'll refer back to Foul Zone and the Mooch quite often,
Yes.
I would totally expect, right? So they get credit for inspiring the idea of us actually sitting down and shooting the podcast, which I think I don't know. We'll see how it goes. We both like to talk, so
talking is great.
That seems like a thing that will probably work for a podcast. And so we'll play around a little bit with different audio levels and how often we use the clips and where we do edits and all that kind of stuff. So again, just kind of bear with us on the first episode or two. The other thing that I wanted to say was there'll probably be some times where we tap into something that's not one of us introducing something to the other. Yeah. There may be some current media that's going around, like maybe when we finish season 2 of Stranger Things, when the new Star Wars movie comes out. I was thinking we should totally do an episode on dark matter. Right. See? We should just do a dark matter podcast.
We should.
I know.
That'd be an excellent idea.
We'll start a second podcast. That'll be our dark matter podcast.
We just talk about it until it gets renewed.
And we just do the same thing they're doing with Feels Like the First Time, right? We just watch an episode and then do a podcast on it and just like dive in deep and kind of do some things. And then we could invite Jodelle to come Skype in with us and talk about it and stuff. And see, that would be awesome.
We should do it, and we should get dark matter renewed.
That's exactly what we need is another media project to try and keep up with.
Exactly.
A second podcast before we've posted our first podcast would be
fine.
Sounds exactly like what we typically do. There will probably be some things where every once in a while we just kind of tie in some current media that's not so much of an introduction one way or the other, but I think typically it's going to be us taking turns making the other person watch something.
Yeah.
So this week 1, this is my week to assign stuff to Presley, and it was assignments based on Ready Player One.
Yes.
It was based on the first few chapters, really, of Ready Player One. As we were listening to things that really kind of tied in deeply with what was going on in Ready Player One are what we went with. And so the first movie that Presley watched as part of this podcast was
Highlander,
the original Highlander. Okay,
I've got some other ones.
Oh, there are sequels. We will not be watching those.
Okay.
All right. So, okay, I got a little bit of information about Highlander here. that pulled up just from IMDb. So it was directed by Russell Mulcahy. Let's say McKay.
Sure.
Russell McKay. It was written by Gregory Wyden. I'm going to go with Wyden. And hold on a second. It's actually the way that it's listed. It's kind of wonky here, so we'll go into this. So written by Gregory Wyden and Peter Bellwood and Larry Ferguson. This is an interesting thing. This is a total aside, but this is something that's probably good for you to know, right? When you look at writing credits on a movie, so this says Gregory Wyden and the word and Peter Bellwood ampersand Larry Ferguson.
What?
So it's one person, the word and, one person, ampersand, another person.
Why?
So they mean different things, okay? So when you see the word and, if you see the credits for writing a movie, if you see guy A and guy B with the word and, that means they didn't work together.
Oh.
First guy wrote a draft, second guy came in and rewrote. And rewrote a big chunk of it. Like if you don't write some huge percentage of it, you don't get a credit. So it was a pretty major rewrite.
Okay.
If you see an ampersand, they were a writing team.
Oh, cool.
And so this is Gregory Wyden, who came up with a story. He wrote a version of the screenplay, and then Peter Bellwood and Larry Ferguson came in together and did like a script doctor kind of rewrite.
Cool.
So when you see the word and versus the ampersand, you can kind of tell that. Christopher Lambert is Connor McLeod, the sort of main character. Here, I'll let him introduce himself. Where is he? Here he is.
I am Connor MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod. I was born in 1518 in the village of Glenfinnan on the shores of Loch Shiel. And I am immortal.
There we go. That's the whole thing.
So there's Connor McLeod. And so what I heard, I don't know how much of this is true. I'm going to throw out some trivia that I've learned as we've done some research on this, but I don't know if any of it's true. But I heard he barely spoke English when he got cast in the part.
Really?
So he speaks French. He's French, I think, a French actor.
Oh, cool.
And so he sort of learned English and learned his parts in English to be able to do this, right? And so that thing, particularly that line right there, right, that thing that he says here, I'll let it play a little bit again. I'll talk over it until it gets to the part that I wanted him to say.
I was born in 1518 in the village of Glenfinnan on the shores of Loch Shiel. And I am immortal.
Okay, so that is one of those things. I think there's a word for it. I can't remember what it is. Maybe you know what it is. You know, like the Berenstain Bears.
Oh my god.
Right?
Yeah.
So this whole thing you misremember, but like really misremember. To the point that you're so confident you think maybe you jumped into an alternate dimension.
There's something effect.
Right? So there's some effect there. Like I could have sworn that at the end of that dialogue he said, I cannot die.
Really?
Not I am immortal, but I am Connor MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod. And then at the end of it, he said, I cannot die. Yeah, so I was going to read, that's a weird thing. I could have sworn he said, and I cannot die at the end. But that's kind of what immortal means, right? Isn't that, aren't you kind of saying the same thing when we say that you're immortal? I just could have sworn he said, I cannot die. But so here's a summary. And it looks like maybe this is a summary on IMDb that was written by some dude. And not like the official. I don't know how this works. I don't know how it works that you get to just put the plot synopsis for a movie on IMDb if you have nothing to do with the movie. But that seems to be what happened here. So let's read the thing. All right, so in New York, the owner of a sophisticated antique shop, Russell Edwin Nash, is challenged to a sword fight in the parking lot of Madison Square Garden by a man called Iman Fazil that is beheaded by Russell. He hides his sword and is arrested by the police, leaving the stadium. Russell recalls his life in 16th century Scotland, where he is Connor MacLeod and is fatally wounded in a battle against another clan. However, he surprisingly survives, and his clan believes he has a pact with the devil. Okay, so here's my first issue. He was fatally wounded, but he survived. Like, that seems to be just a basic mishandling of the language.
Can I bring up an issue too? Is it his name?
What should have been a fatal wound, maybe.
Which, yes. Yeah. And also, he's in like 16th century Scotland, right?
Yes, yep.
He's just hanging out there, and his name is Connor. That's not...
I don't know. That may have been a name.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's like a very common name now. It seems
people
like
still use it. Like, not all names are old names that no one should ever use.
Right.
So, like... So while we're talking about that, no, I'm going to finish this, and then we're going to come back to it. I'm actually going to finish a thought before we go to another thing. All right, so he recalls his life where he was fatally wounded, and survived, which, again, just doesn't make any sense. They believe he's got a thing with the devil. They expel him from their lands.
Expel.
Then he meets Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez, and I have to play his intro, right?
Do it.
I am Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez, Chief Metallurgist to King Charles V of Spain.
All right, so there's scenery chewing Sean Connery in Highlander, one of my favorite characters. I love that guy. All right, so he explains that he's immortal unless he's beheaded. Once again, like maybe a little fast and loose with the English language. You're immortal, but here's how you can kill the guy. Like this guy's totally immortal unless you kill him, which it's just not what immortal means.
Well, it's specifically how to kill him at least.
Further, the immortals dispute a game killing each other, and in the end, only one survives, receiving the prize with the power of the other immortals. All right, I'm going to go ahead and play. I'll do Sean Connery's first because it's a little...
In the end, there can be only one.
Or the Kurgan. There can be only one. That's a good line. That's a really good line. All right, you ready? So he's released by the police, which is what you do after a guy beheads somebody else. But the Snoopy forensic agent, Brenda J. Wyatt, is attracted to the case since she found fragments of an ancient katana and follows Russell. But the also immortal... Oh, no, it kind of fades off. The Kurgan. I'm sure it says something about the Kurgan coming after him, right?
Cool.
Yeah, so the forensic agent just happened to have written a book about ancient swords.
Yeah.
And then this... I don't know. This ancient sword, the katana that he carries, like, apparently huge chunks of it just fall off when he fights people. Because she pulled out a pretty sizable chunk of that sword from that concrete pillar. That was then okay later when he's using it. That's a whole separate thing, right? But yeah, and there was the reason that we were watching, one of the reasons we were watching this movie is because when you get Sean Connery's intro, which we'll come back to.
I am Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez, Chief Metallurgist to King Charles V of Spain.
Right, so how does that? Where does that tie into Ready Player One?
It is actually quoted directly in the book in some of the early chapters when Parzival is first meeting Artemis, or Artemis if you are bad at pronouncing things, and he has his avatar name hidden, so she can't see what his name is or anything. So she asks him directly who he is, so that she's not stuck in the middle of nowhere with some random stranger who shouldn't know who he is. And he says that line.
Well, she says, "Who are you?" Right? Because she can't see his name.
Right. And he says the first part of that line, which should I try?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I am Juan Sanchez Ramirez.
I am Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez.
Oh, that's first? I thought it was the other way around. Villalobos Ramirez, and then to introduce himself, and then she repeats the second half of the line. Chief Metallurgist to Charles V.
I am Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez, Chief Metallurgist to King Charles V of Spain.
Yeah. Charles V, not Charles V. Charles V of Spain.
Wait.
Yeah. So that shows, again, this is total validate me, right? So he throws out the name, and she immediately responds, "Oh, you're the chief metallurgist to King Charles V of Spain."
Yeah.
Because they both know Highlander so well.
Yes.
And so as soon as they did that intro, I was like, "Oh, okay, so cool. This is definitely a movie that we have to watch."
Yes.
And it gets mentioned a couple of other times, but that was the direct reference, and so I knew that this was something that we had to tie into. And I always loved it. Like as a kid, this is a movie that I really, really loved. I watched it many, many times. I haven't seen it since then, so us sitting down and watching it was the first time that I've seen it in many, many years. So I'm curious to hear overall, we'll go into some details around what we thought about it and stuff, but what were your impressions of Highlander? And be gentle. This is my childhood that you're talking about.
It was super confusing to me. I don't know what about it was confusing, but it was I guess a lot of movies, they're written very differently now.
Yeah.
And I'm so used to this structure of movie.
The current one.
The current structure of movie. This is how a movie or a TV show works, and this is how a plot works now. That going back to some older stuff. What?
No, I'm just back in ancient times.
Not. It is older. That's the definition of the word older. Yeah. I was looking at older stuff. the different like writing and stuff.
So, what was different? What do you think? I've got that as one of the notes that I wanted to talk about. Like, what do you think were sort of significant differences structurally in how a story's told these days?
Structurally, like this one, I feel was a lot more look at these cool people fighting with swords, and and I've noticed for a couple of the older movies that I've watched that there's a lot of like action in it.
Yep.
And I don't know if it's to show off like this new, because it like CG and stuff was like sort of new, I think, at the time. So they were
This was cutting edge. Yeah, you wouldn't know it to look at it today, but at the time it was certainly cutting edge. Yeah. They definitely wanted to show off some of the effects. That's
I
true.
can like tell that they're trying to show off some of the effects, and there's a lot more action in it.
Yeah, you get like every once in a while, and this still happens today. It's different kinds of things, right? But like there's some new effect that's possible on film, and so a director is like, oh, we have to have this in the film. Like we have to find a way to use this thing that somebody just invented that's brand new. And certainly like it stands out more when you're watching like Highlander, just because, they're not as good. The effects aren't as fancy, right? At the time they were super fancy, don't get me wrong. But yeah, so that's true. So he was definitely trying to show off some of the effects as much as he was trying to. The other thing is that the guy that directed it was he was a music video director.
Oh, really?
And I don't know, music videos may not even be really a thing. I guess they're a thing. Like, people still make music videos.
Yeah.
There's not really MTV where you just watch music videos all day and stuff. Like, that was a huge thing.
That's
like,
only
when that came out, like, we watched music videos a lot. And the language of music videos was very different than the language of theatrical films. Mm-hmm. In the same way that now YouTube, like, we always talk about, like, the editing style on YouTube, like what we're trying to do on YouTube, is a very different thing. And that's why we defer to you about edits on YouTube, because you're more, versed in the language of YouTube.
Yes.
And so they brought someone in who was a music video director to direct this film, which became a trend too for a little while.
Right,
and so it was more like fast cuts, and it was kind of harder to keep track of what was going on.
Yeah.
The soundtrack obviously was a really important part of this movie, with Queen doing the soundtrack. And I honestly thought that they used Queen songs in the soundtrack, but Queen actually wrote these songs for this movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like they watched rough cuts of the movie. And then, like, on the way home in the limo, again, I don't know if any of this is true, but I'm going to say it like it is. On the way home in the limo, Freddie Mercury is, like, writing the lyrics to some of the songs. And so they all wrote different songs and put them together and recorded the music for this movie. Like, it was purpose-built for this. I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah. But, again, you're dealing with a music video director that does that kind of thing. So it was kind of quick cuts and a little bit harder, like, from a narrative standpoint to follow. And I thought, like, for me, it felt like it was a little bit more about the story, like the plot. Mm-hmm. Like, it was very driven towards driving the plot forward.
Yeah.
And not so much driven towards developing the characters, which I think modern films are a little bit more character driven. They tend to be a little bit more about developing the characters and having at least some rational basis for why people do what they do. I think we cared a lot less about why people did what they did, as long as what they were doing was cool. Yeah. Right? And so if you're in a sword fight and you're lopping some dude's head off in the basement of Madison Square Garden, that's a cool thing to do. I don't really care why you're doing it, right?
Just having a good time.
And then, like we talked about, like towards the end, when the inevitable like love relationship comes on, it's like immediate, happen. Right? Yeah, it's like immediate. Like they've met twice and now they're in love with each other. Oh, you let me stab you in the belly, so now I love you.
Yeah, I didn't even question it. I was just like, yeah, that's how movies happen. That's what happens.
Yeah, but like in general, like from what you were talking about, which I think is a great point. I love that you catch insights into these things a lot. I think the storytelling was different, and for me, one of the big things that jumped out was that they were very plot driven. Like, I need this to happen so that I can get to this, so that I can get to this.
Yeah,
and I'm not going to spend a lot of time making you believe this character would act in this way. Like, there's some rational justification for why this person would do this thing. So, yeah, I totally agree. What else do you think was different, or what other impressions do you have that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I do feel like, what you were saying, they cared less about what they were doing. It was just like, so long as it's cool, it's happening now. Yeah. We're doing that. Right. The, like, little bit, like, this is, I guess, not in a way it's different, but something that stood out a lot to me was a little bit of hand-drawn animation. In the
like the very
screaming
end.
When he was
the quickening,
yelling, that.
Yeah. I guess that was technically the prize.
Yeah,
because there were several quickenings.
Yeah.
Before the actual prize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he was like yelling, that hand drawn animation was really cool. I loved that.
Yeah, like the little dragons and demons
Yeah.
and stuff flying around. Yeah, I read too that those were supposed to represent like the spirits of the other immortals that were in the swords.
Oh,
It was
sick.
almost like Voldemort's wand,
I
right?
thought you were gonna say Voltron. I was like, yeah.
Voltron, like Voldemort's wand, right? Like everybody he killed was somehow in the wand, and then
Their
you could
wand.
cast a spell that made them come back out. So that's what that made me think
Yeah,
of,
that's
right?
cool.
Yeah. So I think it was similar. They were supposed to be those kinds of things. And really, we talked about this a little bit. So what was the primary purpose of like the electricity effects in the prize
It was
scene?
to hide the wires.
Yeah, and how good a
Hanging.
job did it do at hiding the wires?
It drew attention to them because
Right.
the electricity is in that specific place
It
where
was-
the wires are.
It was really bad. Like, I mean, it's a cool, and I don't remember seeing that. Like, that's not something that stood out at me, for me. Like, oh, when that scene was coming up, I wasn't like, oh, Presley, watch this. Look at the wires this guy's hanging from. Like, I don't remember even noticing that and like latching onto that when I was watching it when I was younger. But this time watching it, I was like, oh my God, look at the wires. And like his shirt was all like puckered from where the wires were lifting him up. Like, it was really terrible. And then they just did this electricity that covered the wires, but it looked like wires made out of electricity, right? It just like totally drew attention to them perfectly. Yeah, that was really funny. And then in that same scene, I was just showing you today, I think,
Drop
there's the
the
really cool
sword.
like lion's head on the hilt of this katana
Yeah.
that he's got. And he, when he drops it in that shot, the little lion's head just breaks off of it and shoots out of the frame and like rolls it. And then if you look, there are several shots of him holding the sword and the lion's head's gone. So it looks like it broke so badly, maybe they couldn't put it back together. And even when they did like second takes and things like that, it's just gone. And so during that shot, that kind of comes and goes the whole time, which is really funny. But I was going to say also that speaking of the sword, so Masamune, they call it a Masamune, which he was a really famous Japanese sword maker.
Okay, cool.
And it has become like a name that gets used a lot in anime and different kinds of media as a sword maker. Like if you're going to name a famous sword maker, the Masamune is somebody that you reference. And so that's who made the sword for Sean Connery.
Okay.
And that also comes back as the sword in Ready Player One. That either
that's what that was?
that was one of the prizes that like Daisho or Shoto I think had.
That was was that not H's sword?
Oh, maybe it was H's sword. It was a prize that somebody won, and I can't remember the whole story
It was
behind
a
it,
sword.
but it was a Masamune, which I don't know that was necessarily referencing Highlander because it gets referenced in so many
know.
other things like anime and stuff. It may have been like a general callback, but it was kind of nice to see that
Cool.
happened in this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the special effects of the prize were definitely a pretty funny thing to watch. It's
Yeah.
still good.
Like
It's a good part of the show.
It's a good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So any other like major things?
Um.
Well, I've got some notes here that we'll
Yeah.
talk through some little details.
Go ahead. I don't.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah. I
All
can't
right.
do anything right now.
Okay, so I just kind of some of it's kind of the beginning stuff, like the wrestling open, like in Madison Square Garden,
Oh yeah.
was just kind of a weird thing. Like,
yeah.
It just didn't make any sense. There wasn't a reason to be there. There was this weird, like overly sexualized image of like this 10-year-old girl.
Wait,
she
where?
looked like
I'm
10.
sorry?
Well, it had like there were I don't remember who the wrestlers were now. I should have watched and
They're
taken some
just
notes on kind of this
hanging.
stuff. It was just a really weird open. And then he's sitting in Madison Square Garden during this wrestling match, and he's clearly not paying any attention. Right?
He's just there.
And okay, this you know what? This goes back exactly to what you were talking about before. They had this thing and they wanted to use it, and so they were finding a way to use it. So I don't know if you've seen these, but like in the NFL now, they have these cameras.
Then I haven't seen it.
No, so they have these cameras that are above the field, and they're on like these wires. And so there's a remote control, and you can move. It's not like a drone because it's actually on wires.
Okay.
But you have a lot of freedom of movement to kind of move this thing around, and they fly it over the players when they're playing and stuff like that, right? And we kind of take it for granted now this is a thing. But I think maybe the first time that they used that in a film was that shot in
Really?
Madison Square Garden.
Oh,
they kind of
weird.
came over the wrestlers and then flew into him where he was sitting in the
Yeah, I
seat.
thought
So it
that was
almost
cool.
looks like a helicopter shot. But it's in this building because it's kind of hovering. And I read that they put, I need to go watch it again, but I read that they put a little like helicopter noise over it.
Really?
Like subtly. Because clearly you don't have a helicopter flying around in Madison Square Garden. Number one, I don't think they were in Madison Square Garden, but that doesn't matter. But yeah, you don't have a helicopter flying around in there. But yeah, I read that like they put a little helicopter effect to make it feel more like a helicopter shot.
Cool.
But it was actually that wire camera. That is a big deal now, but I think this is the first time that they used it.
Sweet.
Yeah, and so clearly he was. I don't know. He wasn't interested in the wrestling. He was kind of there for the fight, maybe.
Yeah,
But you didn't. I don't know why he was there or how he knew that other guy was going to be there or something. And like clearly he gets this like spidey sense that tingles that lets him know that there's some other immortal nearby. And he goes and he fights the guy in the basement who does the like flip flop backflips for no good reason. Like that's. You can do backflips? Okay, we should totally put that in the movie. Like that felt like something that just kind of happened. But yeah, that was kind of a weird thing. Like I don't know why he was there, and I don't know why it opened on a wrestling thing. Wrestling was pretty big. Maybe at the time it was just kind of a big thing to put in there because it never came back. It's not like one of the wrestlers was immortal and showed up later. It was just totally a throwaway kind of opening scene. Yeah. I thought that was a really kind of bizarre thing. And you got to see like a really cool training montage.
Oh, yeah.
When Sean Connery is like teaching him all of this stuff, like that's pure like 80s training montage gold. Music and you got Queen music in the background and this big montage of Connor learning what to do. I didn't really get the deer thing, like when he's like feel his heart and feel his heartbeat, and I thought like he was gonna kill the deer and like but like was he stealing power from the deer to get speed? Like I didn't get exactly what happened there. What did you?
Fusion. I don't know. I thought it was like there was this like weird like if you can feel the deer you will gain the qualities of the deer.
Right, like he was borrowing the power. But did you see that happen at any other
like
time
Speedy,
in the
and
but
so
I know but
deer.
like that was that training thing, but did you see him use that at some point and
No,
did that?
I kind of assumed that it was like through your magical powers, if you connect to all the different animals, you will gain those powers forever.
Totally agree. That's what it felt like. But I didn't get like there wasn't like a Chekhov's gun kind of thing where like in the third act, the Kurgan's beating him down and he sees a rat in the sewer and he summons the rat's power to do. I don't know where I was going with that. But he pulled some rat power to slip through a tiny hole and get away. Like I didn't see that come back and pay off, so I thought that was kind of weird. But seeing a nice training montage, and then we probably won't watch like Team America soon because it's a really offensive puppet movie.
Oh, fun!
But they have a thing. They have a song that they play over their training montage that's called "You Need a Montage." Right? And it's like whenever you need to go from an absolute zero to an absolute pro, you need a montage. I should totally have that on the soundboard, but I don't because I didn't know we were going to talk about that. But it's really funny. But it's a really offensive puppet movie, which I think is great. Like Avenue Q, I want to go see the play. All right, so
play?
No, it's like a Broadway musical, or it may not be a musical. It may be a musical. I don't know, but it's a bunch of puppets using profanity, and I'm all over that.
Me.
All right, so I did think here's one thing I thought they did really well. I liked how they jumped back and forth in time a lot.
Yeah, that
like
was
going
cool.
back to his backstory and then coming forward and sort of moving back and forth and telling his story through that process. I thought they did a really excellent job of that.
That was really cool. They do it in Lost too.
They do it in Lost. It reminded me a little bit of Logan. When you go back and see his immortal-ish life, like his long life that he led. Yeah, that's another weird thing about the Immortals too, is how they all kind of started at different times. Like you were born immortal, you could have been born at different phases.
Yeah,
that's just a total aside there. All right, so I want to talk about the Kurgan a little bit.
Yeah, he's weird.
I love that guy.
He's weird.
I love him. Let's play some Kurgan voice.
There can be only one.
And then they loved that big like fisheye shot. Where, like they had like the Kurgan's face up really close, and then somebody back behind him, like our friend here.
I'm Candy.
Of course you are.
So, like that guy had to have like throat lozenges like every night. Like poor dude having to talk like that all the time. But and I think it was partly because Sean Connery like sliced his throat, right?
Yeah.
So I think that gravelly voice came maybe from his injury.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the movie,
Generally
did you notice that
intimidating.
he put like safety pins?
Yeah, that was really cool.
Because they weren't there for a long time, but he became like this punk rocker, and so since he had the scar, he like had safety pins like holding it all together.
That was
and
cool.
Stuff. Yeah,
aesthetic.
I thought that was a nice aesthetic. That was one of my, and I actually did remember that.
I almost
like
just-
looking back, like at the through whole parts of the movie, I was like, where are his safety pins? Like I totally remember him having, and maybe I just made that up. Like by the end of the movie, I was like, maybe that didn't really happen, and I just thought it would be cool if he had safety pins in his neck for some reason. But then suddenly it finally.
Yeah, I was
showed up.
about to say, I wish someone would slit my throat so I could put safety pins in it.
Yeah,
It's let's not think that.
It's probably not the best best place to go.
That would be cool.
So I did also know a little bit, and you and I talked about this during the movie. Like the Kurgan, in the end, there can be only one. He picked the place that they were going to fight, right?
Oh my god, yeah.
And this is just something that bugged me. And this bugged me as a kid, too, because I was a little too nerdy about sword fights, right? In my head, I had this big idea of what they should be. So the Kurgan has this giant two-handed broadsword kind of thing. He's the
cool
big
sword.
power barbarian user. In your D&D Morphiga world. He's a tank for sure, right? And McLeod has got a katana, so he's got kind of a fast weapon. So it's more the big,
DPS.
strong, heavy thing versus the fast weapon. And for some reason, when the Kurgan wants to have the fight, he does it under this big sign that's all like angle iron and metal and closed in places. And every time he tries to swing his sword, he's banging it into stuff.
He did it for the aesthetic.
He picked totally for the aesthetic. Totally, the director is like, you know what? That sign looks really cool. It'd be awesome to have a big sword fight up there.
Yeah.
So we should totally do that. Let's go
Kurgan
have
did
the
it
fight
for
up
the
there.
aesthetic.
And so yeah, the Kurgan decided this would be a cool place to have. This would be a cool place to have. So he decided to do that, but it was a horrible decision. Other than he cut the sign down, and that was kind of a cool shot. And there were some wires there too that were less obvious. But seeing him do the wire work when he was cutting those things out, I think was pretty funny. But even then, and this time, it bugged me that that's where the Kurgan would pick to fight. But then they fell through like the skylight and landed in a big empty warehouse building,
That
which
was
is where the
cool.
Kurgan should have picked the place to fight in the first place.
Yeah.
That should have been where they fought in the first time. I thought, but yeah, that was just me.
Feels like the first time.
What?
You said first time.
Oh, did I? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the other thing I thought that was really neat towards the end was the prize.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say, like, I forgot. I haven't seen the movie in a long time, right?
Yeah.
And so when he was winning the prize, I was thinking, I was going to say to you, hey, wouldn't it be cool if the prize was mortality? Like, that would be a really neat twist. Like, they should have thought of that when
And
they
they
did
did.
it. And then that happened, right? And that's what they did. Like, I didn't say it because in the back of my mind, I was like, you know what? I don't really know what the prize is. I don't remember. Because they kind of implied that you gained everybody's powers.
Yeah.
There was kind of, this is another implication that I think kind of went sideways in the movie for me. But they sort of implied that when you killed one of the immortals and you got the quickening, that you got that person's power.
Yeah.
And I think if that had been the case, it would seem like the Kurgan would by far be the most powerful guy.
Yeah.
Because I got the feeling he killed like
A bunch of people.
Yeah. Like, Connor McLeod like killed the Kurgan is practically the way that it felt to me. Like
Yeah.
the Kurgan killed everybody else, and then he killed the Kurgan and he won.
Right.
Right. He didn't have to kill anybody else to get to the prize. And so if that was the case, the Kurgan would have been like a ton more powerful, right? So I would have thought that he would have been super powerful if that was the case. But then, like I said, I was just in the back of my mind, I was like, you know what? It would be really neat if mortality, because you always hear kind of these stories about how much it sucks to be immortal.
Right.
And how much immortals hate being immortal. And big parts of Logan are, I want to die. Like if someone can help me die, I would love it. Like I would be a huge buddy to that person. Maybe not. I'd be dead, so I wouldn't be a good buddy, but I would
love them.
I would be
forever.
grateful for like this couple of seconds it took for them to kill me. But like he always wants to die, so I was like, oh, they totally should have done that. But I was thinking, yeah, this was like in the 80s, so there's no way that they were thinking about those kinds of storylines. But again, like this is original. Like it all seems cliche
Cool.
now, but coming up with this idea and having the prize actually be mortality, I think that's awesome.
That was sick. I like that.
Yeah.
That was radical.
And he did have powers, right? Like he could read minds, I guess. I mean, it wasn't totally clear what he got
Not
out
a
of
lot
it.
in that movie was clear.
Yeah. So this is one of the things that like a lot of times I like to say that a movie, the movie in your head is a lot of times better than the movie you saw on the screen.
Yeah.
Like the idea behind this movie, I think is brilliant. Like I love it, and it was it was pretty original at the time.
Yeah.
And like the idea of there being these scattered immortals, and eventually they work their way down, and they're clearly at some point there can be only one, right?
Yeah.
There can be only one.
Clearly the Kurgan is fully on board with there being only one. Like I thought that was a really interesting idea, and so I think the longer it is since you've seen it, the more awesome the movie is in your head. Because your visualization of taking that idea and running with it starts taking over a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's less what you actually saw on the screen. And then you watch it again and you're like, yeah, that's kind of disappointing. That actually wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be.
Like, Yeah.
But then a couple of years from now, you'll be like, oh, the Highlander. Oh, it's so good. You have to watch the Highlander. Like, you'll be doing, a Validate Me with your kid for the Highlander at some point in time. And then you'll watch it and you'll be like, yeah, I'm sorry.
Never mind.
Didn't mean to waste a couple of your hours there watching the Highlander movie. No, I think that what happens in your head with that movie is a lot better than what happens on the screen. But there was some cool stuff on the screen for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Although, like, the entire movie was, like, about I guess you could call it a blood feud. What would you call it?
Yeah,
like,
so we talked about this a little bit, right? So you were saying you wanted to talk a little bit about how silly blood feuds were.
They're stupid. I don't like them.
But, like, blood feuds, they have to be generational, right?
Well,
and so it's not like these guys' kids were fighting. Like, it was them. Like, it lasted as long as a blood feud, but it was actually these guys.
Right. You know what would be better if there's, like, a whole bunch, well, maybe not a whole bunch, if there's a good handful of immortal people, and you didn't want all your friends to die, make friends with the other immortal people. Okay. Instead, do that.
Right. No, that's a great point, Presley. That's a really good point. Because there is always this whole story. Like, immortals are usually really lonely too, right? Because they have to watch. They have to watch people die. Then they become hermits and they don't.
No, that's a good idea.
They don't love. It's a great idea. Like, why did? And I guess him and Sean Connery kind of became buddies.
Yeah, they were friends.
Right? But you didn't get the sense that, like, in general, the Immortals were hanging out with each other because they didn't have to watch each other die. That's a really solid point.
You should do that. And then again, the fact that you would have, why would you kill them anyways? Like, at least make friends with them and then betray them, because that would be interesting.
Yeah, and I guess we didn't really see that either, right? Because
there was no betrayal. It was just normal.
Yeah, right. Like, it was going to lead to, at some point, potentially Sean Connery and Connor McLeod having to fight.
Yeah.
Right?
That would be cool.
But that never happened. Like, even if it was like, look, we love each other, but I guess for some reason we got to kill each other.
Cool.
Like, yeah, I don't know if there was a compulsion or something that would have led them. Like, maybe they never would have done that. They would have just been friends.
That would be
the
good.
Guy that McLeod met in the park that the Kurgan then killed later, like,
clearly
they knew each other and they were kind of buddies. And so I guess, like, yeah, there was kind of a buddy. So maybe it was like everybody else was buddies and the Kurgan just went around killing everybody. And then Connor finally killed the Kurgan.
You should have gotten to that much sooner.
Did we ever see any other immortal kill an immortal? Or was it just the Kurgan?
I think it was, like, just him.
Did you get the sense watching it that the Kurgan was the only one that had ever killed an immortal?
I feel like it was just, like, focusing on. I felt like it was just trying to antagonize him more, to make him just, like, full on very bad nasty boy. That was what they were trying to do. Yeah,
there was a whole scene in the church too, right? When
that was a cool scene.
McLeod and the Kurgan were in the church, and then that one was a little weird to me too, because it felt like the Kurgan was kind of afraid of McLeod in the church. Like, McLeod almost acted like he wanted to kill the Kurgan then and there.
But you can't do that in the church.
Well, I know, but the Kurgan, like, number one, the Kurgan doesn't seem like the kind of guy to adhere to the rules.
Yeah.
Like, he really cares that there's some rule against it, right? But he was like, no, you can't fight me here. And McLeod is like, yeah, you have to leave the church at some point. Like, he was the aggressor, and the Kurgan seemed kind of scared of him in that one scene.
Not
it
true.
felt
you
a little weird
have
to me.
To leave.
Yeah, I guess that's probably true. You don't have to leave.
You should stay. You should make an immortal club in a church.
Oh, yeah, I've got another note here. This is really funny. I loved it totally didn't work in the movie. So this is the whole, like, killing your children thing, right? You know about that in writing. Like you write a book or you write a screenplay or something like that, and you have a scene that you just absolutely love, but it doesn't work in the greater context of the story, and so you got to get rid of it. Like, and maybe you use it, you write a whole nother book around that scene just so you can have that scene in there. But when he was doing the drunken duel, when he was all drunk and, like, he had obviously offended that guy, and they were having a duel, and the guy kept stabbing him. With a sword, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." But he stabbed him like 8 times. So there were a couple of reasons that was funny. Like, number one, it was just really funny. Like, it was a clever idea to have. Like, he was so drunk he couldn't defend himself. And so the guy kept stabbing him and then walking off, but then McCloud would just kind of get back up because he's immortal and be like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to blah, blah, whatever. Like, I thought that was kind of, the shtick of it, the shtick of it was kind of funny. It didn't necessarily fit with the movie. But there were also a couple of times when the guy stabbed him that was 100% like kids playing in the backyard, sword under the arm on the other side of the body to look like that you stabbed the guy. Like, really, like, bad effect, right? And I always thought that was super clever. And then McCloud at the end is just like, all right, screw it, I'm sorry. I'm just going to apologize and go home and sleep this off, right? Like, I thought that was really funny.
That was good.
But then the guy that was dueling him, like, his assistant came over with the pistols and is like, shoot him, shoot him, shoot him. And the guy shoots his assistant. Like, I didn't understand any of that.
It was weird.
None of it made sense, but it was a funny, cute little scene that just
it was a good scene.
Maybe
Yes.
didn't belong in the movie though. I thought that was kind of unfortunate.
Yeah.
I did. What about the receptionist that he had? That was the little girl he found. Like,
that
in
made
World
me
War II or
so
something.
uncomfortable.
How so?
Because she was a child.
Mm-hmm.
That was like your daughter. I got the assumption that he raised that person since she was like 3.
Yeah.
That made me so uncomfortable.
Well, what part of that makes you uncomfortable?
Because, like, there's that weird thing that, like, sort of gave, like, I guess, like, that sort of gave me the vibe that he was waiting for her to come of age, and it's like, nasty, away.
Oh, I totally didn't get that vibe
Get
at all.
out.
I totally didn't get that vibe at all.
And, like, the fact that if you raise someone, I assume you would still, like, think of them as that child.
Yeah, I think he did.
In your head.
No, I think the whole time he did. Yes.
Then why would you do that?
What did he do?
I got the assumption that they were dating, and I was
No.
it was like nasty.
No, I didn't get that at all.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and that would be totally creepy. Totally creepy. I didn't get that at all.
Okay, good.
Like, it's the idea that, like, for everyone with a big secret, they need someone who knows their secret.
Yeah.
And she was just the one who knew his secret.
Yeah.
And she was like, it felt like part of her job was maybe like keeping people away from him, and she was really bad at that job. But because like the investigator would come in and be like, I need to see Connor. Yeah, he's not here. And then he would like come down the elevator and or she would like walk by and she'd be like, oh, there he is there. Like there was never an incident where she competently turned someone away from him. But she was the only one that knew his secret. And I kind of like the idea that everybody needs like this one person that they can trust and knows their secret. And I didn't get the vibe at all that there was any kind of a romantic relationship
I
between
did
them.
get that vibe, and it was like so uncomfortable for me. Maybe I was just wrong about that.
Yeah, I think that was a misread. Like, people can let us know if they think there was something there.
Because if there was, that makes me that's creepy.
That would be super creepy if there was. Okay, so that's kind of Highlander, right?
Yay!
I still loved it. Like, it's
a good movie.
It is not a great movie on the screen. Like,
but
while you're watching it,
really good concept.
it's a great concept. There are enough cool shots and cool images and I was going to say good acting, but I can't say that. There's really zero good acting in that movie, I think. I can't think of a case where I was like, oh, that was really well done. There's some pretty poor acting, but it's all entertainingly poor acting. So there's plenty of stuff to recommend it. Like, I think it's totally worth checking out. I really loved it. So let's switch over. Like, you had, in addition to watching the movie, we've been doing a lot of video games for Ready Player One.
Woo!
And just totally coincidentally, coming home from LA Comic-Con, we went out to Santa Monica Pier to go to Bubba Gump's because Presley loves to go to Bubba Gump's. That's our con tradition, is having meals at Bubba Gump's. And the loudest Bubba Gump's in the country is on Santa Monica Pier.
Loud.
I can almost assure you that's going to be the loudest one you'll ever be at.
So loud.
But we went to the arcade there, and they had
Galaga. Which I'm really bad at. I'm going to start with that.
Presley dropped some quarters in the Galaga machine. Let's talk a little bit about that. So we talked about the differences in storytelling in films. Let's talk a little bit about the differences in video game design.
Right. I don't play a lot of video games like Galaga now, actually.
Well, I don't think there are a lot of video games like Galaga
now.
Yeah,
that are like you, I guess you would compare it more to a more modern sit down and kill things game.
Like what?
Well, you're playing like Assassin's Creed now. Like, it would be.
Wow. No. That's interesting. Galaga is like the early Assassin's Creed, like
because
first person shootery kind of thing.
Yeah. And I play Overwatch,
which is first person shooter.
Yes, but it is multiplayer, which is different.
Oh yeah.
And that has like a different play style and everything, because you have to pick according to other people, and it's not just like you have your character and you sit down and you shoot things.
But like Galaga was, it was also like those days, video games were like one screen, right?
Yeah.
Like Pac-Man or Dig Dug.
I played Pac-Man
or
too.
Tempest, which you'll play later because
I
that
do
was
need to play
definitely mentioned a
Tempest,
lot. Galaga, Donkey Kong, did I say that?
I played Donkey Kong before.
But like a lot of it, you just have this one screen, and maybe there's some Joust.
Ooh,
There's
yeah.
some subtle changes in the layout of the screen, and maybe the bad guys get a little faster or something, but like not a ton changes. You just play that thing over and over and over and over again, right?
Yeah.
And so that was a very different kind of play style, right? When you're doing those old school video games, you just learned to master that one screen. And then really your enemies, Centipede, the Centipede just got faster. Maybe got a little longer and got a little faster. Missile Command, like all of those games, you're really just playing this one scenario over and over and over again, and things just keep going faster and faster until your reflexes have to get a ton faster. Like I argue that they were harder.
They are so much harder.
Yeah.
So much harder. And like, because I play Overwatch, I play comp. I'm not great at comp, but I play Overwatch and I play Minecraft and I play these games, and they are so much easier even when I have them to their hardest difficulty.
But like, was it boring to you because it's just the same screen? Like, what did you think about it?
It was boring to me because it was hard. It was hard, and I was upset that it was hard.
Right.
Because I don't play video games I'm bad at.
You were like, I have to say, you were really bad at that game.
I know, it was hard.
I don't know.
It's a hard video game.
I don't know how it was possible for you to be so bad at it.
It's like because I don't know the controller. I don't understand it quite.
Like, I thought you misunderstood the rules and thought you were supposed to ram your ship into the other ships.
No, I knew I wasn't
You were so
supposed to.
bad.
I knew I wasn't supposed to.
Maybe that you felt like that was the strategy that you should be following.
I wish. No. Like, I wish I had an excuse for that, but like, I think it's just because I'm bad at that video game.
Like, on the podcast listeners out there, here's what happened. Like, I got the game within like 50 points of the high score of the game.
And I said, don't do that.
And I had all 3 ships left, and I had double ships rolling for Presley to take me. And I was like, hey, jump in here and get the high score. And somehow she didn't get the high score.
I was like, don't do that.
I think she lost points somehow in the time that she
I got second place.
Things just exploded. It was really remarkable how fast things went sideways.
Yeah, I didn't understand. Like, I played Pac-Man, and I played, like, before, I've played Burger Time and Pac-Man and Donkey Kong, and those I'm, like, still very bad at, but still a little bit better at. And something about it is, like, yeah, those games are harder, like, really hard.
Yeah, they feel a little more like hand-eye.
Oh, man, hand-eye coordination.
Like, there's some real extreme, like, I don't know, like, first-person shooters, like, with the mouse and keyboard and stuff. Like, you know, it just feels very different, right? But, yeah, it's a very different game style. And, like, I can still... You play those games so much, I can still play. Like, I can still drop a quarter and play Galaga just because I played it.
You got the high score. Like,
the muscle memory. Yeah, I got the high score on 2 machines, right? The muscle memory is just still there because the repetition, again, like playing that same screen over and over and over again. I did it so many times, I still know how to play it. Which I thought was kind of a pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have an interest in going over to like 1UP and playing some classic like
No, I
arcade
want to
machines
play
and
them.
stuff?
I want to play ones that I can learn more. And I think part of it is I play almost exclusively WASD space.
Oh yeah.
The mouse.
Yeah.
That's what I play with.
Right.
And I know that, and I can get used to games with that relatively easily. I can play my DS. And I can.
Yeah, you're not even like a big PlayStation 4 like console gamer. Like I said, the Assassin's Creed stuff. Like you don't even play a ton of that with a controller.
I need to play with a controller more, but it's just been like so long since I've played with a controller that I'm not great at it, and that frustrates me.
Right.
So I don't play with it as much. But I do think like the button, you have a button and a joystick. That is hard for me because there is so much hand-eye coordination involved in that, and the controllers like aren't as good.
Yeah.
Like they get stuck.
Yeah.
And they don't move. They don't respond as quickly.
Yeah.
So it's just like, what is happening?
But so Galaga was the game that Wade was playing at the beginning of Ready Player One,
And also in the beginning of War Games, but not him.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Okay, so yeah, he was when he had to do the War Games playthrough.
For the
whatever
first
act through, we'll call it.
Yeah.
When he had to do the act
There's a
through
name for it.
of War Games at the beginning of War Games, I can't remember what's the main character's name. Do you remember his name?
No.
I don't remember his name.
That guy.
So he was playing Galaga. and he gave his
Do you know
game
the
over to
actor's
somebody
name?
else. It's
He was like apparently like one of the people that did a lot of stuff, right?
yeah, I'm totally drawing a blank. He was
Okay.
he was the guy Matthew Broderick.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
it Matthew Broderick?
Yeah.
He was in Lady Hawk, which we just watched too.
Yes.
So maybe we'll have a conversation about Lady Hawk, which was actually better than
Lady Hawk
Highlander.
was, yeah, I liked Lady
It was
Hawk.
better than Highlander. I thought it was better.
Someone in the comments of the video pointed out that it was basically Shrek, and I was like,
It is kind of, there are Shrekky
You're
elements. There's no
right.
doubt. Well, like,
Shrekky
there's only
elements.
like 10 stories, right? We just keep telling them over and over again. There's only 12 notes, as people are fond of saying in the music world. Yeah, okay, so there's some Galaga, right? All right, so let's say Highlander and Galaga individually, cool or not cool?
I thought they were both cool. Like, it's putting aside the fact that I'm terrible at Galaga.
Yeah.
I think they were both very cool.
So
I like
here's a better question for you.
validation.
The fact that I could take the high score on 2 Galaga machines at Santa Monica Pier, does that make me cooler or less cool?
No, that makes you. I mean, like, I am the worst person ever to ask that question.
Yeah, no, but this is
I
you're
am telling
validating
you.
me in
Yeah,
this
that is
podcast.
a
In your
very
eyes,
cool.
does that make me cooler or less cool?
That makes you cool because that's like a cool thing to be able to do.
Because there's always like the prototypical example is the old guy that's a little too good at the skating rink. Like, he's real good at what he does, but it does not make him cool, right?
I'm the worst person. I'm like, good for you.
That's the
Go
example I always use when I'm talking about you don't want to be the old guy that's a little too good at the skating rink, and that expression is probably losing its relevance rapidly.
No one needs
if it's not already gone. I can use it with people my age and older, but yeah, so that you don't want to be that guy, and so maybe like you don't want to be the guy that can take the high score on the Galaga machine.
do.
At the
Yeah,
Santa
I wanna
Monica
be
Pier.
that
So that's
guy.
still cool.
Yeah,
All right.
to
And
me,
so,
I'm a really bad person to ask that question though, because I'm not.
but this whole podcast is about me asking you that question and you asking me that question.
Yes.
So let's keep that up. We'll keep up the pretense for now.
Yeah.
And so Highlander being one of my favorite movies when I was a kid. More cool, less cool.
I don't know how to compare that because I don't know any other movies you had around.
Well, no, but
when
like
you were a kid.
now that you know, looking
Disney
back,
is
and
better.
as when I was your age, I was watching Highlander and loving it. Is that cool? Or
I
not
like
cool?
my movies better that
Yeah.
I had, but like
so
it was a good
basically
movie.
what you're saying is less cool.
I mean, no, it's like not. It's not. It doesn't make you less cool, but it makes. But the movie. But like Disney.
It makes me less cool because I liked it. Okay,
good.
so all right, so yeah, that was fun. That was
cool.
good. Let's
Fun movie.
talk a little bit about. So you're up. You get
Whoa,
to
yes.
consume like 4 hours of my time over the next week before we shoot another one of these. And you take control because you get to ask me questions and talk about it in the next podcast.
Woo.
So what am I spending my time doing?
Okay, so I am about 4 hours. Okay, so first of all, you haven't listened to my favorite album, which is Smoke and Mirrors by Imagine Dragons.
Okay, Smoke and
And
Mirrors.
Imagine Dragons is my favorite band. My favorite song isn't on that album. Doesn't matter. It's a really good album, and I like it a lot. And so that was about. I listened to it all at once, several times. So it's about 45 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
So Smoke and Mirrors, and I was gonna make you watch a couple episodes of BuzzFeed Unsolved.
Okay. BuzzFeed Unsolved.
So that would be about 2 hours. Can I put in another 2 hours?
No. This is going to be an ongoing thing,
I
so you
know.
don't need to worry about it.
But yes, BuzzFeed Unsolved and Smoke and Mirrors.
Okay, do you have episodes? So I'm thinking like maybe
I know what episodes of BuzzFeed.
Yeah, so the
Unsolved
people that are
we
listening
watch.
along, maybe they want to watch these things
Okay.
before the next podcast.
So
they can do.
I am
what episodes?
going. I'm gonna have to look up what episode it is. You guys can do that if you guys want to. The episode where the very iconic words "Hey demons, it's me, ya boy" are muttered.
Mm-hmm.
The hotel, the one where they go to the haunted hotel, that one is good because it has the two bros chilling in a hot tub, also iconic.
Okay.
And then the most recent one, as of recording this, which is the Goatman's Bridge, because I thought that was
Goatman's Bridge.
very funny. And then the one postmortem for one of those episodes. Because
What does that mean?
the postmortem is they do a Q&A session after.
Oh, okay.
And no,
Is it a separate?
it is a
video?
separate video.
All right.
And maybe I'll make him watch the entire hot dogga, which makes no sense to you. It's the hot dog saga at the end. Shane, who is one of the hosts, who
Yeah.
I know you will like,
Okay.
does these animations on screen
Yep.
for the postmortems.
Yep.
And Ryan gets super annoyed by them when he keeps bringing up more ridiculous ones. So he ended up making an entire saga out of the hot dog.
What was the thing we were watching a while back where they're like, "Where did you get that hot dog?"
What?
Were you watching that with me? Like somebody just ends up eating a hot. They're like, where did you get that hot dog? You're like, that guy had. You're like, you're eating that? Does that not sound familiar to
That
you?
sounds really familiar, but I have no clue what that's from.
Maybe somebody will be able to tell us what that was from.
Who knows?
It was like in a morgue, it seems like.
In a morgue?
Yeah, they were like in a morgue. It's like, where did you get that hot dog?
Was it in Lost?
Yeah. And there was like a
Was
couple
it
of
morgue?
episodes that had a hot dog kind of tied in. It may have been like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which you don't watch. But
I need to watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
You
Can
can
you
watch
make
it. I
that
love
your
it.
thing?
Yeah,
Make
I love
that
it.
your thing because
Okay.
I need an
Yeah,
excuse
I
to
love
watch
it.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
All right, so I'm gonna listen to Smoke and Mirrors. We'll probably do like some genius lyrics analysis.
Yay!
Because I'm sure that those lyrics are quite ingenious.
Are you insulting them?
No, I'm not. I might next
Fight
week.
me.
I might next week, but let's wait and see.
Catch me outside right now.
Until I learn some more. I'm not optimistic
good album.
about the brilliance of it. But I hate lyrics.
You do?
Yeah.
I am we're the opposite then because I will listen to any music if it has good music.
I like music. I like listening to music in a foreign language.
Well, that's
so
also
that I don't even have to pay attention.
Well,
to
that's
the lyrics.
also because the music you grew up listening to, you could not understand a single lyric.
Yeah, we'll do all this in the next one.
Good.
All right, and then BuzzFeed Unsolved. We're gonna do the Haunted Hotel one and the Goat Man's Bridge. Is that what?
And
that's
the Hey Demons, It's Me, Your Boy.
Oh, there's 3.
Yes.
But you don't know what that one is.
I'm not sure,
Okay.
but it's iconic. I'm pretty sure it's no, it's actually the what is that place called? I can't remember. I just realized these are all from Supernatural.
Okay,
You can
we'll
tell which
figure it-
season's my favorite.
We'll figure it out and we'll put it in
But
there.
yes,
Yeah.
I will put it in a description of some sort
Sweet.
and
All right.
let you know.
So that's about it for this week.
Woo!
I'm going to do my homework, and in a week from now, we'll post the next one. And if you guys want to listen to Smoke and Mirrors and watching BuzzFeed Unsolved, then
Please listen to Smoke and Mirrors.
Presley will take
it's
us through
a
it.
good album.
So yeah, if you guys have some suggestions for stuff that we should check out too, then feel free to hit us up on Twitter or email. You can hit us on Twitter at ValidateMeCast.
Yep.
You can send an email to validatemepodcast@gmail.com. I'm following the Foul Zone and the Mooch policy of having your names not match each other across different access points. So, because there's there's size restrictions, character length restrictions on a Twitter handle. So yeah, Validate Me Cast on Twitter. ValidateMePodcast@gmail.com if you want to send an email. We'll get to a point where, like, if we get some interaction, in the middle of this thing, we'll kind of pause a little bit and read your tweets and check into some email and do some things like that if we start getting some interaction from you guys, if you guys have some recommendation. Or
Validate
if, since we're telling you we're doing Smoke and Mirrors and BuzzFeed Unsolved next, if you want to, give us some feedback of what you thought about those things, then as we have our conversation, we'll bring you guys in. I would love at some point in the not too distant future to even bring some people in through Skype. And have kind of a third person kind of come in and chat a little bit, especially if you make a suggestion about something we should check out.
Yeah.
I think we could get somebody in and have somebody do
That'd
something.
be really cool.
Yeah, we can do Mommy, and we can do like a whole retrospective of Olivia Newton-John. And that would be a super fun.
You can do
Xanadu, totally.
You can do
Totally
Hunger
do
Games because I read
Xanadu.
that book.
That would be a fun thing to do. So we'll see. We'll see how this thing grows over time. But like I said, the subtitle, the podcast is officially titled "Validate Me" with the subtitle "Bear with Us." We're gonna figure it out.
Should I add that to the logo?
It's just like we were doing with the YouTube channel, right? Go watch the first couple of YouTube videos. Like they're not all winners either. So yeah, just give us a little bit of time. We'll sort of figure this whole thing out, and we'll come back and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Woo!
Presley's gonna write us a jingle. She already built the logo for it. Like all that stuff's kind of coming together. We got a website.
Vaporwave.
This stuff's coming up. There's a bunch of stuff coming. Sound good?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I don't have an outro for this
You know what? We
yet.
don't have a sign off. So this is another
Thank you
thing
so
where
much for watching.
bear with us. We'll see you
Bye.
next week. Bye.